Okay, let's dive in. We're talking about something that affects pretty much everyone listening
Mhm.
every single time you go online.
Right. Every time open an app, click a link, post something, even just scroll.
You're leaving behind this trail, a digital footprint. It's a constant flow of information about, well, about you, your interests, what you know, what you like, how you act online.
And for a long time, we've known this data is valuable. Mostly, it's been the engine behind targeted ads, making your online experience more personalized.
Exactly. That's why you see those ads, or why your newsfeed looks the way it does. Advertising was kind of the main game for data value.
Uh-huh. But now, there's something else, something huge, a new force that's just consuming this data at an incredible rate.
We're talking about artificial intelligence, right? These powerful AI models that are popping up everywhere and changing everything. Think ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, image generators, the works.
Precisely. And these models, they don't just magically appear. They need truly enormous amounts of data to learn, to see patterns, generate text that sounds human, make code, create images.
And where does that data come from? A lot of it, a foundational piece, comes from, well, from us, from you.
Exactly. From the things everyday users create and do online. And often, this happens without us really clicking I agree
Hmm.
to this specific use, without us really knowing, and certainly almost always without anyone getting paid for it.
So that brings us right to the core question for today's deep dive. It's a big one. If your digital life, your posts, your clicks, your code snippets, if all that is essential for building these multi-billion-dollar AI systems, should you be getting a slice of that pie? Should you get paid?
And this isn't just like a philosophical question anymore. It's real. It's happening now. There are lawsuits, proposed laws.
Mm-hmm.
It's shaping the future of how the internet works economically.
Yeah, and our guide through this complex topic today is a really insightful source piece. It's originally in Russian titled «Эсségie jour». It's a «Sortie jour».
Which translates nicely to your data feeds the AI, should you be getting paid? It really digs into this whole debate, data ownership, its value, compensation in this new age of generative AI.
So our plan today is to walk through this source piece by piece. We want to pull out the key insights, look at the different sides of the argument, the who, what, why, and how of it all.
The goal is really to help you, the listener, get a solid handle on this. Because it's not abstract, it affects your digital life directly, every single day. It's about the value you create online and who actually profits from it.
All right, let's jump in. The source starts by laying out a pretty fundamental truth about how these advanced AI systems get built today.
Yeah, it makes it super clear. In the world of large language models, LLMs, and other big AI.
You are the data set. That's the headline, essentially.
That's it. These models are trained on just unbelievable amounts of digital stuff. It's not just curated libraries. It's the messy, sprawling output of humanity scraped from all over the internet.
We're talking terabytes, maybe petabytes of data, billions, trillions of words, lines of colored pictures. It's mind-boggling.
And the source really hammers this point home. A huge chunk of this, maybe even most of it, doesn't come from sources that AI companies paid license fees for. It comes from stuff that unpaid users put online.
So where does that leave us? Think about where you find massive amounts of conversation, Q&A, creative writing.
The source gives great examples.
Yeah.
Reddit threads, right. All those discussions. Stack Overflow, with its detailed answers to tech problems. Social media posts, obviously.
Yeah.
Personal blogs. Public forums.
It's the stuff people share freely. Questions, opinions, stories, code fixes, the organic conversation of the internet.
And the source highlights a really stark example of the money involved here. The Reddit deal. It makes this whole thing very concrete.
Right. This is a perfect illustration. Reddit signed a big deal. How much was it again?
The reports mentioned in the source put it at around $60 million per year.
60 million a year. Okay. And what exactly was Reddit licensing for that kind of money?
Their content archives, all the user-generated stuff, years and years of posts, comments, discussions, the collective knowledge and chatter of the Reddit community.
Collected by Reddit, the platform. And who paid the 60 million?
AI companies. Companies building those large language models we talked about, they need massive amounts of human text to train their systems.
Okay, platform owner, Reddit, makes a $60 a year deal based on user content. Now, here's the kicker the source points out. This is where it gets really contentious.
Yeah, the actual people who wrote those comments,
Yeah.
shared that advice, started those threads,
Yeah.
the users,
And they got.
nothing. Zero compensation as part of this specific deal.
And were they even told, like, hey, that insightful comment you wrote is now part of a package being sold to train AI?
Not necessarily, no. The source suggests they likely weren't informed that their contributions made freely to a public forum, were being bundled and sold specifically for commercial AI training.
That feels significant. So the takeaway here from the source is pretty stark, isn't it? Your little contribution, a helpful comment, a detailed answer might seem small on its own.
But add it all together from millions of users, and it becomes this incredibly valuable data set, a data set that has directly shaped the AI tools we see today.
Yet for that crucial building block, you, the individual contributor, probably got no direct credit, no financial return.
It really throws the disconnect into sharp relief, doesn't it? The value comes from the users, but the financial benefit flows elsewhere, specifically in this context of large-scale AI training. It raises huge questions about, digital labor and who owns what online.
Which leads us right back to that core question for you listening right now. When you share something online freely in a public space, and the platform turns around and sells access to all that collective sharing for millions, specifically to train commercial AI,
And you, the person who actually created that bit of value, get nothing.
does that sit right with you? Does that feel fair? What does that imply about the value of what you share online?
It's a tricky one. And it gets even trickier when we look at the next point the source tackles, which is the main argument AI developers often use to justify this.
Right. The source dives into this core debate. Is public content essentially fair game?
This is really the crux of the legal and ethical fight. On one side, you have many AI companies basically saying, look, if it's out there on the public internet, anyone can see it, anyone can read it, then it's fair for us to use it for training.
The argument being it's like a human reading public library books to learn.
Kind of, yeah. That's often the analogy used. If information is publicly accessible, it's fair game for learning, whether the learner is human or machine.
But the source immediately brings up a counterargument from critics, and it's a powerful one. It's less about the letter of current law, which is maybe lagging.
And more about the spirit of things: consent, ownership, fairness. Critics say, just because my blog post is readable online doesn't mean I gave permission for it to be ingested by a machine to build a commercial product that might even compete with me someday.
There's a difference between reading for understanding and systematically scraping billions of items to build a commercial intelligence.
Exactly. It feels like it violates the original intent, maybe, or it's taking value without giving back an uncompensated appropriation.
And the source gives a really vivid example of this conflict playing out, the whole situation with artists versus generative AI models.
Oh yeah, this has been a huge flashpoint. Visual artists are really concerned. They see AI models being trained on vast databases that include their artwork, scraped from websites, portfolios, social media, often without any permission.
And it's not just about copying specific images, is it?
No, that's the crucial part. They argue the AI learns their unique style, their techniques, their aesthetic. So now anyone can potentially generate new images in the style of that artist without the artist being involved or paid.
Wow, okay. It's like the AI absorbed the essence of their creative identity and labor.
That's how many artists feel, yeah.
Yeah.
And they're not just talking about it. The source points out they're taking action.
What kind of action?
Lawsuits are being filed. Artist groups, even big stock photo companies, are pushing for new laws. They're fighting back.
And what do they want these laws to do?
Primarily, they want systems that require explicit opt-in consent. So creators have to agree before their work is used for AI training. Or, if it is used, there needs to be a system for compensation.
They want control over how their creative work is used to build these powerful new tools.
Precisely. And this whole artist situation, as the source presents it, really pushes back hard against that simple public fair game idea.
It suggests that putting your work online doesn't mean you've just waved away all rights forever, especially not the right to control its use in training commercial AI products.
That's the main takeaway here from the source. Even if current copyright laws are still catching up or are ambiguous, the ethical arguments and the legal challenges are growing stronger. Being online doesn't automatically equate to a free pass for commercial AI training built on creator contributions.
It really forces you to think about the nuances, doesn't it? The source kind of prompts this question. Is there a real meaningful difference between a person reading your public blog post to learn something
Versus an algorithm ingesting that same post, along with millions of others, structurally, to train a commercial product?
The artists certainly seem to think there is, and their fight suggests many others agree.
And this idea of value extraction goes beyond just the content you actively create, like posts or art. The source then broadens the lens to look at something maybe even more pervasive, the value of a click. Who's profiting from just your behavior online?
Ah, okay. So we're moving beyond just the things you type or upload to how you act on these platforms.
Exactly. The source points out that platforms go to, and I quote, extreme lengths to analyze and monetize not just what you see, but how you interact with it. Every pause, every scroll, every click.
They're not just selling eyeballs to advertisers, they're selling incredibly detailed predictions based on behavior.
Right. And this leads to a really important concept the source introduces. Training signals. This is critical to understand. You're not just using the platform. Your actions are actively training the platform's own algorithms.
How does that work?
Well, every time you linger on a post just a little longer, or quickly scroll past something else, or click a certain kind of link, follow someone, unfollow someone, you're sending signals. Signals about what catches your attention, what bores you, what you prefer.
The source uses social media behavior models as a prime example here. We all live this every day.
It details what they analyze. Dwell time on posts, comment activity, follows, skips. It's incredibly granular. These aren't just casual observations by the platform. They are data points measured with precision.
Okay, so they collect all this behavioral data. What do they do with it?
The source explains that the patterns they find in your behavior, aggregated across millions or billions of users, are fed into machine learning models. These are the algorithms that decide what shows up in your feed, who to suggest as a connection, which ads you're most likely to click on.
They basically build models to predict and influence your behavior to keep you engaged.
Exactly. They power the platform's entire engagement engine, keeping you scrolling, clicking, watching for as long as possible.
And the end game for all this optimized engagement.
The source is blunt.
Mhm.
These models, trained on your behavior, make the platform incredibly effective at its core business model.
Selling advertising space.
Right, ad space worth billions and billions of dollars globally. The platform's revenue depends fundamentally on keeping users hooked, using algorithms trained on those users' own clicks and scrolls.
Which brings us to this really powerful, maybe even radical takeaway the source puts forward in this section.
It's a potential mind shift. The source argues you're not just the product being sold, your attention, your demographic profile. You are also, essentially, the data labor that builds and refines the very algorithms making the platform so profitable.
Wow. So my scrolling isn't just passive consumption, it's an active input, a form of work that improves the machine that sells my attention.
That's the argument. Your interactions are the unpaid labor that trains the engagement models, which in turn generate massive revenue for the platform owners. It makes you think about the hidden work involved in just using these platforms.
It really does shift your perspective on what's happening when you're just casually browsing.
Absolutely. And recognizing this value, both in the content you create and the behavioral data you generate, naturally leads the source to the next big question. Should there be some kind of payback? A creator dividend for AI training.
This section explores ideas that are definitely gaining traction, aren't they? With experts, activists.
Very much so. The core idea is that if individuals, whether they're professional writers, artists, coders, or just regular forum users, create the stuff that trains AI, maybe they should get a cut, some kind of royalty or payment.
It feels like the logical next step if we acknowledge the value being created by users. The source uses a good analogy to help visualize this. Music royalties versus data royalties.
Yeah, most people get the basic idea of music royalties, right? You stream a song on Spotify, Apple Music, whatever.
And the artist-songwriter label gets a tiny payment.
Exactly. There's a system, however imperfect, to compensate creators based on how much their work is used.
So the source asks, could we build something similar for AI training data? Could writers, coders, artists, forum posters get paid when their data is used to train these systems?
It's drawing that parallel. Just like a musician gets paid per stream, maybe a data creator gets paid per use, per contribution to the training set.
And are there actual projects trying to make this happen? The source mentions data unions as a use case.
Yes, it points to initiatives like Have I Been Trained?, which lets you check if your work might be in popular training data sets, and broader concepts like the Data Dividend Project, which advocates for users getting payouts from companies profiting off their data.
What's the main goal of these data unions or dividend projects?
Fundamentally, they want to give users more power and a potential financial stake in their own data. They aim to let you track how your data is used, have more control over whether it's included in AI training, and maybe even receive payments linked to its value.
So the takeaway here from the source is pretty clear. AI is booming, becoming a trillion-dollar industry, as the source puts it.
Right. And it's built on this foundation of user data. So the idea of a fair share model, distributing some of that wealth back to the people whose data made it possible, is picking up serious steam. It's moving from the fringes to the center of the conversation.
The sheer amount of money involved makes the question of compensating data creators seem less like a nice to have and more like a fundamental economic and ethical issue, doesn't it?
Definitely. It leads you to ask yourself, does this concept of a data royalty feel like the right direction?
Yeah.
Is it feasible? Is it something you'd want?
And all this discussion, the growing pressure, the lawsuits, it highlights that this whole area is still evolving. We're on the legal and ethical frontiers, as the source puts it.
Absolutely. Nothing is set in stone here. Things are changing fast,
Yeah.
driven by the tech itself, the money involved, and just growing public awareness.
The source points to several areas where we see this change happening right now. First, the lawsuits.
Yeah, a definite uptick in copyright lawsuits. Authors suing over their books being used. Coders suing over code repositories. Publishers suing over their news articles.
They're basically saying, hey, this is our copyrighted work. Just because it's online doesn't mean you can use it to train your commercial AI for free. They're testing the boundaries of existing law.
Exactly. Then there are the new laws being proposed.
Right. Governments are starting to step in.
Legislators are trying to write new rules specifically for AI. Things like requiring explicit consent to use data for training, demanding more transparency about what data is being used, maybe even setting up compensation frameworks. They're trying to build the guardrails after the fact, really.
And maybe most importantly, the source mentions a shift in how people feel about this. Public sentiment.
It describes it as moving from passive acceptance to active questioning. People are waking up to the idea that their data has real value, and they're less willing to just let big companies use it however they want without any benefit back to them. A sense of digital self-worth, maybe?
And the source highlights a major ongoing case that pulls all these threads together. The New York Times lawsuit against OpenAI.
Yeah, this is a big one. The New York Times, a major publisher, suing OpenAI, a leading AI developer.
And the core of their lawsuit is
They claim OpenAI used millions of their copyrighted news articles that cost a lot to produce, to train models like ChatGPT, all without permission.
what's their main argument about why that's wrong?
They argue their journalism isn't just text. It has significant economic value and reflects huge editorial investment. They say OpenAI unfairly took this valuable content to build a system that can now summarize news and answer questions, potentially competing directly with the Times and undermining its business.
So this case, and others like it, really underlines the source's takeaway here.
Yeah.
The legal groundwork is being laid as we speak.
It feels like a pivotal moment. The source puts it starkly. The next few years will define whether individuals or institutions control their data destiny. Will the power stay concentrated with the big tech players, or will creators and users gain more leverage, more control, maybe more compensation?
It really frames it as a power struggle over the value generated by human creativity and interaction in the digital age. Individuals versus the platforms and AI labs.
So if we accept that some form of compensation or user control might actually happen given all this pressure, the source then asks the practical question: what would getting paid actually look like?
Right, moving from if to how. If a system is put in place, what models does the source suggest could work?
It outlines a few different possibilities being discussed. One is building on deals like the Reddit one, but making sure a portion of that license fee flows back to the actual users whose content made up the dataset.
So the platform negotiates, but users get a share based on contribution.
Another idea is data wallets. This sounds more user-focused, like you'd have a tool or a dashboard to see exactly where your data is going for AI training, approve or deny usage, and track its value.
That sounds like it puts a lot more transparency and control in the hands of the individual.
It does. Then there's a more granular idea: usage-based royalties. This is interesting. It's not just about your data being in the training set.
Okay.
It suggests you could earn micropayments when your specific contribution, your sentence, your code snippet, your image, can be identified as directly influencing the output the AI generates for someone else.
Ah, okay. So if the AI uses something clearly derived from my work to answer a prompt, I might get a tiny payment. That ties compensation directly to the AI's function.
Exactly. It's complex, but potentially more precise. And finally, the source mentions simpler things like opt-out registries and clearer consent options, giving people a way to just say, no, don't use my stuff, even if it doesn't involve payment.
So a range of options, from revenue sharing to direct control and micropayments. The source also brings up an existing example that touches on this idea of user compensation, the Brave browser, and its B8 token.
Right. Brave is a web browser that lets users opt into seeing certain ads. When they see those ads, they earn a small amount of cryptocurrency, the basic attention token, BAT.
So Brave is already paying users for their attention.
Exactly. It's monetizing user attention, but sharing the value back. So the question the source raises is, could you adapt that? Could a similar token or micropayment system work to reward users for their data contributions to AI training?
It shows the core concept isn't completely alien, right? Monetizing user engagement and sharing back value is happening.
That's the takeaway. Compensating for AI training data is a new challenge, but the underlying idea of valuing user contributions financially isn't entirely unprecedented. The source does caution, though, that building the infrastructure to track data value and manage potentially billions of micropayments accurately would be a massive technical challenge.
Looking at those models, platform sharing, data wallets, usage royalties, opt-out lists, and the Brave example, which one feels most workable or maybe most fair to you listening? They all seem to have potential benefits and serious difficulties.
And speaking of difficulties, the source rightly spends time on the risks, challenges, and inevitable pushback any data compensation scheme would face.
Yeah, it's easy to talk about fairness, but actually building a system that works is, well, it's hard. Really hard.
Incredibly complex. The source flags some major hurdles. First, just figuring out who gets paid. Attribution online is messy. If I post something on platform A and it gets shared to platform B and then scraped for training, who gets the credit? The original author. Platform A, platform B.
Especially with remixes, edits, anonymous posts, tracing ownership is a nightmare.
Huge issue. Then there's the problem of anonymous or aggregated data. A lot of AI learning comes from massive anonymized data sets, looking for broad patterns, not specific sentences. How do you assign individual value or compensation in that scenario?
Right. If the value is in the collective pattern, not the individual data point, how do you pay the individual?
Then there's the worry, mentioned in the source, that demanding payment for data could just slow everything down. Could the cost and hassle of licensing data stifle AI research and innovation, especially for smaller players or academics?
A potential brake on progress.
Possibly. And maybe the biggest practical challenge the source highlights is the risk of gaming the system. If you pay people for data, what stops them from flooding the internet with junk just to earn money?
The incentive loops and spam problem?
Exactly. The source describes this scenario. If there's money to be made by contributing any data, people might just generate garbage. Repetitive text, slightly altered public domain stuff, nonsensical content, just to get paid.
And if that happens, the training data becomes polluted. You'd be training AI on spam.
Which would make the AI itself less useful, less trustworthy. It could completely backfire, damaging the very technology it's supposed to support.
It really drives home the source's point here. Any compensation system has to be designed incredibly carefully, very balanced.
Meticulously thought through. The goal has to be rewarding genuine, valuable contributions, real human knowledge, creativity, interaction, not creating loopholes for people to exploit the system with low-quality filler. That's a tough balance to strike.
Okay, so we've looked at the value of our data, how it's used, the legal fights, potential solutions like payment models, and the serious challenges involved. Where does this leave us? How does the source wrap all this up?
It boils down to a core message that comes through really clearly from the analysis. Your digital activity, your footprint, it has real significant value. It's not just digital exhaust. It's a key ingredient shaping these incredibly powerful AI systems that are changing our world.
And the source offers this really concise, thought-provoking conclusion. A way to frame the path forward. It says, pay the people, maybe. Respect the people. Absolutely.
I think that captures the complexity perfectly. Actually implementing direct universal payment for every bit of data used, pay the people, is incredibly challenging. The feasibility is uncertain, maybe.
Right.
But the baseline, the absolute minimum standard we should demand, is respect. That means transparency about how data is used, giving users meaningful consent options, and providing real control. Absolutely. That part feels non-negotiable.
So it reframes the whole debate, in a way. According to the source, it's not really if AI will use our data anymore. It already is on a massive scale. That ship has sailed.
The real question now, the one that defines the next era of the internet and our role in it, is twofold. First, would you have a meaningful say in how your data gets used for AI through consent and control? And second, potentially, Will you be recognized and rewarded when your contributions create significant value through some form of compensation?
It really boils down to fundamental questions about our rights online, the value of our digital labor, and how the immense wealth being generated by AI should be shared.
Exactly. And as we finish this deep dive, drawing on this source, we want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to chew on.
Think about this. AI isn't going away. It's going to become even more integrated into everything we do work, creativity, information, social interaction. So how are you going to approach the value and use of your own digital footprint in that future?
What level of transparency feels necessary? What degree of control do you want? And what kind of compensation, if any, feels fair to you when your online life helps build these powerful, often commercial intelligence systems?
It's definitely something worth reflecting on as you click, type, and scroll your way through the digital world, constantly contributing, knowingly or unknowingly, to the data that fuels artificial intelligence. The value you create is real.
And thank you for joining us for this deep dive.